Ladies and gentlemen, sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all, because silence. Silence is the sound of strength. It's the moment you stop begging to be seen and start remembering your worth. When you go quiet, not out of anger, but out of peace, you become unforgettable. The person who once took you for granted begins to feel your absence like oxygen leaving the room. And that's when they realize losing you wasn't just a moment, it was a lifetime mistake. And silence is one of the most powerful languages you can ever speak. It's the language of strength, of boundaries, of self-respect. When someone hurts you, betrays you, or takes your presence for granted, your instinct might be to scream, to explain, to demand that they understand what they've done. But sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is say nothing at all, not because you're weak, not because you've given up, but because you've finally realized your worth doesn't need defending. And you see, silence isn't passive. It's not about ignoring someone to play games. It's about stepping back to remind yourself who you are without their noise clouding your judgment. When you stay silent after someone has disrespected your love, it forces them to confront something they've been avoiding, the reality of what it means to lose you. Because when you're no longer there to call, to check in, to ask how their day was, to fix the mess they made, that absence starts to echo. And that echo, it's louder than any words you could have ever said. And when you withdraw your energy, you take away their comfort. People get used to your presence. They get used to your warmth, your care, your effort. They assume it'll always be there, even when they stop deserving it. But when you go quiet, when your messages stop, your tone softens into stillness, and your eyes no longer seek theirs, something inside them shifts. The comfort they took for granted turns into a void they can't fill. And that silence is the mirror they didn't want to look into. Because suddenly they have to see themselves without your light shining on them, and that reflection isn't as flattering as they imagined. They start replaying every moment they dismissed you, every time they ignored your needs, every chance they had to make things right and didn't. Silence doesn't just create distance. It creates accountability. It forces them to sit in the discomfort they caused. But here's the truth that makes silence so powerful. It's not about punishing them. It's about protecting your peace. When someone hurts you, you can either spend your energy trying to make them understand the depth of that pain, or you can spend that energy rebuilding yourself. One path keeps you chasing validation. The other path helps you reclaim your power. Silence is that second path. It's not about proving a point to them. It's about proving to yourself that you don't need their acknowledgement to heal. And when you choose silence, you choose maturity over chaos. You're not giving the silent treatment out of spite. You're creating space to remember who you were before the disappointment. That space becomes sacred. It's where you begin to rediscover your voice, your confidence, your joy. And as you sit in that quiet, something beautiful happens. You start to realize that their loss is not your tragedy. It's their consequence. And because the truth is, someone who truly valued you would never put you in a position where silence was your only option. They would listen before you had to walk away. They would notice the shift before you had to detach. But when they don't, when they continue to take without giving, when they continue to talk without hearing, you must protect your energy by walking away quietly. And make no mistake, they will feel it, not instantly, not always visibly, but inevitably, because when a person has been loved deeply, that love leaves a mark. When they've been seen, supported, and understood by someone genuine, nothing else compares. You can't replace authenticity. You can't substitute the kind of presence that came from a heart that truly cared. So when you step back, they begin to realize the gravity of what they've lost. They start reaching for pieces of you in other people, but it never feels the same. The laughter isn't as effortless. The connection isn't as deep. The warmth isn't as real, and in that void, they begin to miss not just you, but the version of themselves that existed when they had you. And that's the silent lesson your absence teaches, not through words, but through experience. You show them what life feels like without your love, your energy, your presence. And that lesson is far more powerful than any argument, any explanation, any closure you could try to give. And there's a quiet kind of strength that comes with not reacting. When you choose not to respond to every slight, not to chase clarity from someone who was never clear with you, you begin to feel lighter. You stop trying to manage their emotions and start managing your peace. That's when you realize silence isn't emptiness, it's empowerment. It's the moment you stop letting someone else's chaos dictate your calm. And while they sit there wondering if you've moved on, if you still think about them, you'll be busy growing. You'll be rebuilding your confidence, redefining your standards, and reconnecting with the parts of yourself that forgot how to breathe when you were trying to hold that relationship together. You'll start laughing again, not because you've forgotten the pain, but because you've learned to find joy beyond it. That's the quiet revenge, your happiness, not because you're trying to make them regret, but because you're finally choosing yourself. And they'll remember your silence in the moments they least expect it. When they hear your favorite song, when they pass by a place you once went together, when they see someone who reminds them of your smile. That's when it hits them, the absence, the realization, the truth, and it doesn't come with anger, it comes with regret. Because they finally understand that love isn't guaranteed, that once you lose someone who truly cared, you don't get that kind of energy back easily. And so stay silent, not to win a game, but to honor your growth. Because the person who once needed to explain themselves, to prove their point, to fight to be seen, that person doesn't need to exist anymore. You've evolved past the need for validation. You no longer seek closure from people who were never open. You've learned that silence says everything words cannot, that it speaks of strength, self-control, and the ability to walk away from what no longer serves you. And the pain they feel when they lose you isn't just about missing your presence, it's about realizing they underestimated your absence. They thought you'd always be there, waiting, forgiving, giving one more chance, but your silence reminds them that time ran out. That love, no matter how deep, can't survive in a place where respect has died, and that realization, that piercing regret, is what changes them. And so, when you go silent, don't question your decision, don't wonder if they'll ever understand. They will. In their own time, in their own way, but by then, you'll be too far ahead, too healed, too focused, too happy to care. Because silence doesn't just make them feel the pain of losing you. It helps you rediscover the power of finding yourself. And as you continue to stay silent, something powerful begins to happen within you. You start to feel the shift. The noise that used to consume your mind, the constant overthinking, the late-night questions, the what-ifs that used to tear you apart begins to quiet down. You start to realize that your peace is returning, not because they came back, not because you got closure, but because you stopped searching for answers in a place that only ever gave you confusion. That silence, once uncomfortable, starts to feel like home. You no longer crave their explanation because you finally understand that the peace you were chasing was never in their words. It was always in your ability to walk away. And when you step back, you gain perspective. You begin to see everything you were too close to notice before. You see how much effort you poured into someone who gave you fragments. You see how often you settled for almosts when you deserved wholeness. You see how your love became something that required convincing instead of simply being cherished. And in that realization, your silence becomes your statement. You're no longer fighting to be understood. You're allowing the truth to reveal itself without your help. And the beauty of silence is that it teaches you patience. It teaches you how to wait, not for them, but for yourself. You start waiting for your peace to grow, for your joy to rebuild, for your sense of self to rise again from beneath the weight of what you once tolerated. Every day that you remain silent is another day you remind yourself that your healing doesn't depend on anyone else's actions. You start to understand that emotional freedom doesn't come from being chosen. It comes from choosing yourself. And as that power grows, so does your presence. The same silence that once felt like emptiness starts to feel like strength. People notice it. They notice that you're no longer chasing, no longer explaining, no longer trying to be seen. You carry yourself differently. There's calm in your eyes, confidence in your energy, and a quiet dignity in your steps. It's not arrogance, it's peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing that you've survived something that once broke you and came out more grounded, more sure, more centered. And that's when they start to feel it, the distance, the absence, the reality of what they've lost. At first, they tell themselves they're fine. They convince themselves that they don't care, that you'll come back like before, that the silence is temporary. But days turn into weeks, and weeks turn into months, and your absence becomes undeniable. They start to scroll through old messages, replay old memories, look at old photos not out of nostalgia, but out of disbelief. They can't believe you're really gone, because deep down they never thought you would be, and it's in that disbelief where the pain begins. Because suddenly they're confronted with the truth that you once lived with, that love without effort loses its power, that when you stop nurturing something real, it withers. They start realizing how many moments they wasted being careless, how many chances they ignored, how many times you tried to reach them and they brushed it off. And now that you're silent, they're forced to sit in the silence of their own making, but by then, you're not the same person anymore. You've grown. You've spent your silence rediscovering your value. You've remembered what it feels like to wake up without anxiety, to smile without pretending, to feel at peace in your own company. You've learned that solitude isn't loneliness, it's clarity. You no longer see your silence as something you're giving to them. You see it as something you're giving to yourself. You've reclaimed your power by refusing to keep feeding energy into something that drained you. And that's what hurts them the most, not just that you're gone, but that you've become unreachable. They can't access you the way they used to because the version of you who would have answered their call, who would have forgiven so easily, who would have accepted the bare minimum, that version no longer exists. You've outgrown the space where they left you. You've risen above the level where they met you. You've learned to live without the very thing you once thought you couldn't. and in your silence, you've built strength. You've learned that real power isn't in reacting, it's in controlling your reactions. It's in choosing not to respond out of emotion, but out of wisdom. You no longer let every message pull you back into old cycles. You no longer allow your heart to be manipulated by temporary guilt or familiar affection. You've learned that missing someone doesn't mean you belong with them, and love doesn't mean staying where you're not respected. And there's a certain elegance in not needing to explain yourself anymore. You're not bitter, you're just done. You've realized that healing doesn't require an audience. You don't need them to understand why you went silent. You don't need them to see your worth now that it's gone. You don't need to justify your peace to anyone who disrupted it. You're simply living proof that silence speaks for itself. And while they wrestle with their guilt, while they replay everything they could have done differently, your life quietly begins to bloom again. You start attracting peace where there was once chaos. You attract people who match your energy instead of draining it. You attract opportunities that make you feel alive instead of small. Your silence created space, and the universe filled it with everything you were missing. And they, on the other hand, are left with memories. They start reaching out, testing the waters, sending messages that don't quite say what they mean. Hey, how have you been? Just wanted to check in. I've been thinking about you. But by then, you understand that silence isn't broken just because they finally speak. You've learned that not every apology deserves a response, and not every regret deserves a reunion. Because the goal was never to make them chase you. It was to find yourself so completely that their chase no longer matters. And that's the quiet victory. You didn't need revenge. You didn't need to make them suffer. You didn't need to prove your value through their recognition. You simply chose yourself, and that choice became the loudest statement of all. It told the world that your heart is no longer a place for those who only show up when it's convenient. It told your future that you're ready for something deeper, something real, something worthy of your silence. And they may move on with someone else, try to replace you, try to pretend they're unaffected, but replacements never heal regret. Because no matter how much they distract themselves, your absence lingers. The kind of love you gave isn't something easily forgotten. It's not the kind of connection that fades just because time passes. It becomes a standard, a painful reminder of what they once had but didn't value. And that's where your silence continues to echo, and you're no longer defined by what they did or didn't do. You're defined by how you responded with grace, with composure, with silence. You've proven to yourself that walking away quietly is not weakness, it's wisdom. It's the understanding that peace is more valuable than validation. It's the realization that your silence holds more power than any explanation ever could. Because when you stay silent, you let time reveal what words never could. You were the one that mattered all along. And though they may never say it out loud, deep down they know. They feel it every time they look back. Every time they remember how effortlessly you loved them. Every time they realize no one else made them feel seen in the way you did. They feel the loss in moments when life gets quiet, when they're alone with their thoughts, and your silence becomes louder than ever. And so you keep walking forward. You let your silence continue its quiet work. You let it teach the lessons words never could. Because one day, when they finally understand the weight of losing you, you'll be far beyond the place where they left you. standing tall, free, unbothered, and surrounded by peace that no one can take away again. And as time moves on, your silence begins to do something even more profound. It reshapes your identity. You start to see yourself through a new lens, not as someone who was left behind, but as someone who chose to move forward. The quiet becomes a mirror, showing you how much you've evolved. You begin to notice that your emotions are no longer ruled by their absence. The moments that used to sting now feel distant, like echoes of a life you've already outgrown. You stop checking your phone for messages that never come, and you stop wondering if they're thinking about you. Because now you're thinking about something far more important, your future, and silence gives you that clarity. It strips away the noise of what was and helps you focus on what's next. The energy you once poured into them, you now invest into yourself. The love you once gave so freely, you redirect inward. You start doing the things you neglected when you were busy trying to fix, explain, and prove. You rediscover old passions, nurture new dreams, and reconnect with the version of yourself that existed before the heartbreak. And in doing so, you realize that the person you've become is stronger, wiser, and far more grounded than the person who once begged to be understood. And you no longer need validation from the one who couldn't see your worth. You've learned to validate yourself through your peace, your growth, and your progress. You start to understand that silence isn't just the absence of words, it's the presence of power. It's the space where you take back control of your life. It's the quiet confidence that doesn't need to announce healing, but simply radiates it. And that's when the transformation becomes undeniable. You're no longer chasing closure, you're creating it. You're no longer waiting for them to change, you've changed. And while they might still be replaying the past, you're busy building something new. Your silence has evolved from a shield into a declaration, a quiet reminder that you have learned to walk away from what no longer aligns with your peace. And the universe responds to that kind of strength. When you stop chasing the wrong things, the right things start to find you. You begin attracting people who speak your language of effort, who understand the value of mutual respect, who don't make you question your worth. Opportunities begin to appear, doors open, energy flows, and everything that was once stagnant begins to move again. Because when you choose silence over chaos, you clear the path for abundance to enter, but while your world expands, theirs begins to shrink. They start to feel the silence differently now. It's no longer just quiet, it's haunting. Every time they scroll through their phone, your name is still there, but it's lifeless. No new messages, no calls, no response. The familiar comfort of your attention is gone, replaced by the heavy reality that they are no longer a priority in your world. And the more they realize that, the deeper the regret sets in, and they might try to mask it with distractions. They might tell themselves they've moved on, but late at night, when the noise fades and the world slows down, your silence becomes impossible to escape. Because it's not just silence, they feel the absence of your kindness, your laughter, your patience, your care. They feel the difference between someone who tolerated them and someone who truly loved them, and that difference burns. And still, you don't break your silence, not because you're trying to hurt them, but because you finally understand that you don't owe your peace to anyone who couldn't protect it. You've learned that you can miss someone and still not want them back. You can remember what you had and still know that it's no longer good for you. You can love from afar and still choose distance. That's emotional maturity, the ability to hold compassion and boundaries at the same time. And even though they may reach out, trying to find cracks in your resolve, your silence reminds them that the version of you who once settled no longer exists. They might say all the right things now, speak with the emotion they should have shown before, but your silence speaks louder than their newfound words. It tells them that timing matters, that once trust is broken, love alone isn't enough to rebuild what's been lost. It tells them that sometimes the opportunity to make things right expires when respect is taken for granted. And you've come to understand that silence is not revenge, it's release. You're no longer fighting for their attention, you're freeing yourself from the need for it. You're no longer explaining your worth to someone who couldn't see it. You're no longer begging for effort that should have been natural. You've replaced pleading with peace, chaos with calm, and disappointment with direction. That's what silence does. It transforms pain into wisdom and heartbreak into purpose. And each day, you grow more comfortable in your solitude. You stop fearing the quiet and start craving it. You begin to see silence as your sanctuary, a place where you can think clearly, dream boldly, and heal deeply. And as you continue to evolve, you notice how different your energy feels. You walk lighter, you smile easier. You radiate confidence that doesn't depend on anyone else's approval. You've become the kind of person who doesn't chase love, you attract it. Because now you know the right person won't need your silence to recognize your value. They'll recognize it from the beginning. And while they're sitting there trying to fill the void your silence left behind, you're filling your life with things that nourish your soul. You're surrounded by people who value your presence, who don't take your effort for granted, who make you feel seen without asking. You start to realize that the pain that once felt unbearable was actually your breakthrough. It forced you to grow. It forced you to level up. It forced you to see that love shouldn't require losing yourself. And you've reached a place where you no longer measure your worth by whether someone comes back. You measure it by how peacefully you can move forward. You no longer replay the story wondering what you could have done differently. You understand that sometimes walking away is the only way to protect your heart. Your silence becomes your closure, your protection, your declaration that you've outgrown the version of yourself that begged for less than you deserve. And it's not just them who notices your silence, it's the world. People start to see the difference in you. The quiet confidence, the way you carry yourself, the peace that follows you wherever you go. You've become magnetic, not because you're trying to prove something, but because you've found alignment. And alignment is powerful. When you no longer seek validation, you attract authenticity. When you stop chasing, you invite what's meant for you. When you go silent, you finally hear your own intuition guiding you towards something greater. And meanwhile, they're left wondering how they became the memory in a life they once had access to. They replay everything they did wrong, every time they ignored your efforts, every moment they took your love for granted. They realize that while they were busy assuming you'd always be there, you were busy learning how to live without them. And now they can feel it, the shift, the loss, the emptiness that comes from realizing they were the reason you chose silence. But you're not looking back. Your silence isn't just about them anymore. It's about every version of you that was ever silenced by doubt, fear, or heartbreak. It's about reclaiming your narrative, rebuilding your confidence, and remembering your strength. It's about teaching yourself that you don't need to be loud to be heard, and you don't need to be chosen to be worthy. You already are, and the power of your silence lies in its truth. It's not the absence of love, it's the presence of self-respect. It's a statement that says, I've learned my lesson and I'm moving forward. And in that movement, you create a new standard, not just for how others treat you, but for how you treat yourself. Because you've realized that losing you was their consequence, but finding yourself was your reward. And so, the silence continues not as an act of punishment, but as a testament to your evolution. You've turned heartbreak into a higher frequency, pain into purpose, and distance into destiny. And as the world watches you rise in silence, they'll finally understand what it truly means to lose someone who learned how to love themselves. And as the days pass, your silence continues to do what words never could. It redefines your strength. You begin to see how powerful restraint truly is. The world often tells you that speaking up, defending yourself, and proving your point is what strength looks like. But real power, you now understand, is in your ability to walk away without needing to be understood. It's in your capacity to hold peace while everything around you tempts you to break it. Silence has become your new form of discipline. It's not suppression, it's mastery. And you've learned that reacting to everything only gives away your energy, and you're no longer willing to give pieces of yourself to people who don't deserve them. Instead, you've chosen to conserve your strength for the things that matter, your growth, your healing, your joy. You no longer explain your choices to anyone because you realize that people who truly see you never need an explanation, and those who don't will twist your words anyway. Your silence has become your filter. It protects you from noise, drama, and manipulation. It gives you space to think, to breathe, to decide. And in that space, your soul begins to expand. You start to fall in love with the quiet life, the one that's not constantly seeking approval or attention. You find beauty in slow mornings, in deep conversations with people who nourish your spirit, in moments of laughter that aren't forced. You start to realize that peace isn't found in other people, it's built within you. You've stopped searching for healing in the same place that hurt you. You've stopped waiting for apologies that will never come. You've stopped expecting closure from chaos. Your silence has become your new beginning, and you now see that staying silent isn't about pride, it's about alignment. You've outgrown the need to fight for a connection that was never meant to stay. You've accepted that not everyone is capable of meeting you at your level of depth. And that acceptance doesn't come from bitterness, it comes from wisdom. You finally understand that some people are meant to be lessons, not lifetimes. And once you learn the lesson, you no longer need to repeat it. That's what your silence signifies. It's the end of the cycle. And the longer you stay silent, the more they start to feel the weight of it. It's not the silence itself that breaks them. It's the meaning behind it. Because silence means you've stopped waiting. It means you've stopped hoping they'll suddenly understand. It means you've stopped giving them the emotional power they once had over you. Your silence becomes a statement that says, I'm done trying to fix what refuses to grow. And that's a truth that stings because they can feel it in their bones. This time, you're really gone. And they begin to notice the difference between your absence and everyone else's. Others may leave quietly, but you left completely. You didn't leave the door open. You didn't linger. You didn't look back. You detached with grace, not anger. That's what haunts them the most, how you left without a scene, without resentment, without trying to make them feel guilty. Because silence that comes from peace is far more powerful than words that come from pain. And while they sit with their regret, you're evolving. You've learned how to fill your life with meaning again. You've built new habits, new routines, new sources of happiness. You've become so self-aware that you can now recognize the red flags you once ignored. You're no longer drawn to inconsistency, confusion, or games. You crave depth, honesty, and effort. You're no longer impressed by charm. You're impressed by consistency. You've reached a level of self-respect where you no longer settle for potential. You choose reality. And in your silence, your energy shifts. You stop being the one who waits and start being the one who chooses. You stop being the one who explains and start being the one who observes. You stop needing to prove your worth and start embodying it. That shift is magnetic. It draws new opportunities, new people, and new love into your life, not because you're chasing, but because you're aligned. Silence has given you that alignment. It has cleared the noise so your intuition could finally be heard. And every time they try to reach out, your silence answers for you. Every time they tell themselves you'll come back, your distance proves otherwise. Every time they think of you, they realize that you've outgrown the space they left you in, and that realization doesn't come with anger. It comes with a deep ache. Because losing someone who was always there for you, who gave love so freely, who forgave so easily, is a kind of pain that doesn't fade quickly. They start to see that your silence isn't punishment. It's the proof that you were the only one who truly cared. But you're not watching anymore. You've detached from their storyline completely. Your silence has given you the gift of perspective. You can now look back without longing. You can remember without hurting. You can think of them and feel gratitude instead of grief, because their absence forced you to meet the version of yourself you had been neglecting. The one who was strong, confident, and complete. The one who no longer confuses being wanted with being valued. The one who understands that love should never cost your peace, and the silence that once felt like an empty void is now your sanctuary. You've learned to fill it with things that inspire you, music that uplifts your spirit, books that challenge your mind, goals that push you forward. You've started living for yourself again, not through the lens of someone else's approval, and that independence, that quiet self-assurance, is something they can't take away from you. That's what they lost when they lost you, the version of you who gave without limit, who stayed when it hurt, who believed in potential over patterns. That version has evolved into someone unstoppable, and the irony is that now your silence speaks louder than their words ever could. It exposes the truth of who they were. It highlights what they failed to appreciate. It reminds them of everything they thought they'd always have access to. Because silence has a way of amplifying regret. It doesn't scream, it doesn't accuse. It simply exists as a mirror, reflecting everything they chose to ignore. But while they're caught in the echo of your absence, you're building something beautiful, something that no heartbreak can destroy. You're building a life filled with peace, purpose, and authenticity. You've learned that silence isn't about shutting the world out. It's about tuning into yourself. It's about listening to the parts of you that were silenced by compromise. It's about honoring your own emotions instead of begging others to. You've reached a level of emotional maturity that few understand, but everyone feels when they're around you. That calm, that grace, that quiet confidence sits the energy of someone who has healed, and healing, as you've learned, isn't loud. It's not about posting your strength or proving your progress. It's about living differently. It's about no longer reacting the way you used to. It's about walking away from situations that used to trigger you and choosing peace instead. It's about knowing when to speak and when to stay silent, and trusting that both can be equally powerful. And so you stay silent, not to make them miss you, but because you no longer need to be heard by those who never listened. Your silence is not the absence of love, but the presence of boundaries. It's not a punishment, but a promise to yourself to never again lower your energy for someone who doesn't rise to meet it. And that promise changes everything, and because now your silence isn't just something they feel, it's something you own. It's the sound of your power, your peace, your evolution. It's the space where you no longer chase closure because you've already found it within yourself. It's where you finally understand that the pain of losing them was temporary, but the peace of finding yourself is permanent. And as you move forward, your silence continues to echo, not in sorrow, but in strength. It whispers to the world that you have mastered the art of letting go without losing yourself. It speaks of resilience, of grace, of growth. It reminds anyone who once doubted your worth that you were never the one who needed saving. You were the one who learned to save yourself. And that kind of silence, it's unforgettable.